Are you interested in the field of IT auditing? Do you want to become an IT auditor? Stay tuned for more information. Welcome to this video. We're going to talk a bit about IT auditing, and with us today is Rob Clark. He's a Chief Audit Executive and very knowledgeable about the history of IT auditing, and I look forward to his insights in terms of how the profession has evolved. Rob, can you start out by telling us a little bit about what has been the evolution and how we have matured in terms of what IT auditing is all about?
Well, thank you, Dr. Murdoch. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I can talk about the history of IT auditing because I am that old. I've been doing this now for, I can't even believe I'm old enough to say that I've been doing this for 3 decades. But I got into auditing really kind of by mistake. I really didn't think that I was going to end up spending a career in auditing and compliance. But what I found was a very unique opportunity to make a positive impact on the organization. And when I first got into the audit profession, it was very segregated in terms of its functional focus. We would have financial auditors on one side of the audit house. We would have perhaps some operational auditors, and then we would have what was referred to as EDP auditors, electronic data processing auditors. So yeah, I'm kind of dating myself. And the function of the EDP auditors back in the day was to more or less be the interface and with the systems in order to provide data for the financial auditors so that they could do some of their sampling and analysis. And occasionally the EDP auditors would end up having conversations with and interacting with the folks within the data center. And computing back at that point was largely controlled through a key in the door, in the lock of a door, because we were separating and controlling access to our key data because it all resided in one data center. And now, boy, have times changed, right? Because now information technology is so prevalent, and we have on our phones the computing capacity that used to take up racks and racks and huge buildings in and of themselves. So now what we're looking at is the migration of, I don't have on my teams anymore people who just have the title of a financial auditor or an operational auditor or even just an IT auditor. I'm looking for that integrated skill set where everyone on the team is going to be able to have a certain knowledge of IT security so that we can integrate those into our audits.
So what are some of the skills that are necessary to be able to join such a team?
Well, I think one of the things that I look for as when I'm building out an internal audit team is really if we're looking at it from the perspective of the chief auditor, our responsibility is to ensure that we have the collective skills, knowledge, and competencies in order to be able to accomplish our audit plan. And in every audit function, there is going to be the expectation that we are going to examine our IT infrastructure and our IT security. You get into a boardroom and you're given a presentation, and people expect you to actually speak to what the posture of cybersecurity is for your organization. So what I look for when we are building out a team, and for somebody who's watching this who's perhaps giving consideration to venturing into the world of auditing, what I would say is it's a wonderful field to get into because you have an opportunity to make an impact on our organizations in a very unique way. And what I look for is not only those who have the skills, knowledge, and competencies and awareness of the concepts of information security and information systems, but also those who have for lack of a better term, the emotional intelligence to be able to figure out how we can integrate that. The last thing we want to do is go into an engagement and start throwing around a bunch of buzzwords and trying to take the position and try to impress the IT partners within our organization that we are subject matter experts in all things IT. It's the first way to lose credibility. What we want to do is actually come alongside of our IT partners. And I use that term partners intentionally because I believe that the best way for us to be able, as auditors, to be able to affect change and to have a positive impact is for us to take on that partnership, to get on the same side of the table, as it were. And actually, I do that in our entrance conferences. I try not to sit directly across the table and have that sort of us versus them approach, but really to get on the same side of the table and say, let's look at these things together. So the IT auditor has to be familiar with what the landscape of risks is. And those are ever changing. So I look for somebody who has that constant burning desire for continuing education, for always wanting to learn and expand their skill sets in all things related to IT and security.
So what are some of the hot topics these days? I'm going to ask you in a few moments so you can start getting ready mentally for soft skills. But let's start with the technical side of the skill set. So what are some of the technical skills that you will wish that IT auditors who are interested in this field will have as they begin their journey?
Well, it does have to be a combination of the technical skills and soft skills. But let's talk about the technical skills first. I think for somebody who is considering entering the field of IT auditing, chances are, if I'm talking to that person right now, if we're talking to that person, it's somebody who just has a passion for maybe they define themselves as a nerd, and somebody, and I use that term affectionately. I put myself in that same category, so I'm not saying that disparagingly, but somebody who really has an understanding of and a desire to understand all of the different aspects of what it takes to build an information system structure at an organization, everything from cloud security to the Internet of Things to understanding all of the compliance regulations and the standards, the guidance, somebody who is not afraid to sit down and go through all 800 pages of the NIST guidance, the National Institute of Standards and Technology guidance, because that actually provides a really good framework for all of the things that we as an organization need to be focusing on. So I look for somebody who has the technical expertise. Perhaps they have come from an IT background or in their education or in prior jobs, but it doesn't necessarily require an advanced degree in computer science in order to be a good IT auditor. It takes the aptitude and the desire to constantly learn because the technology is ever changing. And so I look for somebody who is passionate about trying to expand their skill sets on a continuing basis.
You mentioned in passing just a moment ago risk assessment and just awareness about risk. So from what you just described, it sounds to me as though they need to be able to balance some of the technologies and the techniques and the different tools that are available and continue to emerge just about every day, and be able to think from a risk perspective in terms of how does this help us either neutralize some of the risks that can impact the organization and threaten its ability to achieve its objectives, but also as an opportunity. How can this tool, technique be applied in my organization, perhaps as a recommendation for the organization to consider and perhaps adopt? Is that also very important in this case?
Oh, it's critical. Everything has to start from an understanding of the risk. And there's a couple words that you just mentioned as you tee that up that I want to be able to kind of pull out. One is just the concept of the evaluation of risk. And the other thing that the other word that you mentioned is tools. So we ought to, as auditors, in order to be effective at helping to identify areas of risk, ought to utilize tools in the assessment of that. And when we're talking about risk, I think it's important that we define what we mean by risk. Usually, if you're having a conversation, and oftentimes when I'm teaching classes, I ask people to say, how would you define risk? And typically the first things that people come up with are fraud or security breach or something that is really, that they would categorize as a really adverse impact to the organization. I like to kind of bring it back a little bit to say, let's start with defining risk as those things that would potentially impede the organization's ability to achieve its strategic goals. So starting in a risk assessment process with what are our organizational goals? And what is the corporation, the company's goals, mission, vision? What is it that we are trying to accomplish? And then asking the question of what would prevent us from achieving that? What would impede our ability?
Very, very good. Along those lines, then, what kinds of soft skills are very, very important to be able to do that effectively?
Well, that balance, I'm glad we're talking about both of those, because in order for an auditor to be effective, in order for an IT auditor to be effective, there has to be that combination of the skills, knowledge, and competencies. So it's not just the technical skills. The thing that I see, and I've seen over the years in trying to develop our IT audit staff and that side of the house, those people who have those technical skills, is that sometimes there is a gap in the communication skills. What we look for is, and I mentioned this earlier in terms of the emotional intelligence, what we mean by that is the way that we are able to communicate, interact with not only our clients and our technology partners within the organization, but the senior leadership, the board, the people to whom we're going to be communicating. And I think it's absolutely critical to make sure that auditors have an ability to take the technical and boil it down into layman's terms. The last thing that we want to do is go into a board meeting and start throwing around a bunch of acronyms and trying to impress the audience, the recipients of your message, with how smart you are and how many, how technical your knowledge is. Because what I see in sitting in some of those board meetings is that when people's eyes begin to glaze over because they don't quite understand what it is that we're trying to convey, then two things happen. Number one, they begin to just tune out. Number two, they're afraid to ask questions because they don't want to expose themselves as not having knowledge about what it is that you're talking about. And so it's our job as auditors to communicate in a way that our message is going to be understood and received. So what I look for is the development of those communication skills so that we can really take on that perspective of being a partner, a valued advisor, a strategic thought partner with leadership. You combine those skills, those soft skills, with the technical skills, and you've got a bright future in this industry.
Thank you so much for helping us better understand what are some of the key attributes, skills, competencies, and expectations that someone who is contemplating joining audit, and in particular IT auditing, and how they can become successful. So your input has been very helpful in better understanding how technical skills need to be balanced with soft skills. And to our viewers, we have a lot more content to share with you, so please subscribe to our channel. There's a lot there for you.